So we are going to start off with 10 minutes of meditation, just as an introduction, but nothing too elaborate, and then dive into the material a bit. So let's just spend a couple of minutes settling into our meditation position. So because it's evening time, sometimes the mind's a bit foggy. So if you would like to do the 9-round breathing exercise, we can just maybe start with that to clear the stale wind energy in the body and mind. Inhaling, we can take the first finger, the right hand, close off the left nostril, long, slow, deep inhalation through the right nostril, and exhaling through the right. And we do that 3 times. I'm not going to explain it too elaborately. Most of us know about it. Inhale through the right, exhale through the left. We do that 3 times on this side and then on the opposite side and then through both nostrils. Just allowing the breath to go a little bit longer, slower and deeper as we go into that exercise. And in that space, taking a moment just to bring to mind your motivation. When we think about our intention or motivation, what does that bring to mind, as we move into the class? How can we make that most beneficial, our motivation? So Dharma practice, studying the Dharma, reflecting and meditating, it's all about this deep transformation of our motivation for life, our motivation for being, and our motivation eventually to be able to be more and more benefit for others. Deepening and expanding that motivation and our capability to be able to do that. That's what Dharma practice is about. And of course that sounds nice, we want to be able to benefit others, benefit ourselves. But of course what gets in the way of that is, certain states of mind, certain limitations that we're under control of right now. These limitations, what we call them in the Buddhist path, what we try and clarify in their mind as the 2 causes of suffering that the Buddha taught, karma and delusion. So it's, in one sense, we know some of our limitations, our friends, our family, even Dharma friends, they show us. they're very helpful in pointing them out. So we might not have entered into a relationship with someone, even at a level of friendship, But they in that relationship, somehow they help us to see some of our stuff, you know, whether it's partners, friends, even if it's not asked, you know. They help us to see some of the limitations we can't see in ourselves, you know, maybe like lack of patience, unskillful speech, a sense of selfishness in some areas. So these all stem from something much deeper in our mind, you know, that the Buddha taught, karma and delusions. These are not easy for us to pinpoint. So very much in sutra, the sutra path, we're trying to really get clear what's blocking our potential for happiness. What states of mind, what karmic imprints are blocking our ability to be more beneficial right now. And what renunciation is. So Kelly asked last week, you know, so where do we pivot from into tantric practice? It's from this place, really, of renunciation, this word, you know. And what is that? It's a kind of taking responsibility for our own stuff. Really deep level of responsibility. Combined with a level of determination, a kind of grit that wants to be free from that, recognising these deeper causes of suffering, karma and delusion, are really blocking our innate potential for ourselves to experience happiness and for us to be more and more beneficial for others. So that's where we actually really enter from one place. That's one place we enter into Tantra, by getting a really good scope of what that is in our own mind, and taking a responsibility to lift those limitations off the mind, to clean the mind. In that place, then we can, our Buddha nature, the practice of Tantra, can start to unfold more easily. As we slowly clean the mind at the grosser levels of karma, delusion, you know, anger, attachment, wrong view of self, you know, these things are not easy to see in the mind, but that's what we have to take responsibility for in the sutra path. And keep digging away at these, so the tantric path becomes more powerful, can start to unfold more in our mental continuum, in our experience. And then on top of that, we want to have, as I mentioned, this motivation to benefit others, bodhicitta. That needs to come into the mix as well. That much more I can enlighten, awaken, lighten myself up in my karmic load. That much more, then I can benefit others. So wanting to awaken, wake up, emerge from our own limitations so we can be more and more beneficial for others. So let's see if you can just sit with that for a moment. Sit with that motivation. And then to bring a sort of blessing, an energy, a momentum into our practice, we take refuge, reminding ourselves that, you know, this is not a short path. When we go into the realm of karma and delusion, trying to really figure that out in our own mind, it's not a short path. It's not an easy work. And when you read a reliable guide, reliable teachings, reliable community, to guide us through this deep work, because it's not just going to be about this life. For most of us, it's going to be over some lifetimes. And some of us have already come to that conclusion as we get older. We know that. But we want to keep connected life after life with a really reliable teacher, in this case the Buddha, reliable teachings and reliable community practitioners. That we want to create imprints for many lifetimes to connect with that Buddha, in this case the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. So my continuity consciousness always be attracted towards Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, the spiritual teachings, with holding the wish always to benefit others, as I develop, to benefit others, help others gradually awaken up, emerge from karma and delusion. So either just having Buddha there in the image, or feeling the presence of Buddha like the radiant sun in the space before us, present with us throughout the class, just like the sun. The sun is always there, shining. Like that, the blessings of the Buddhas they're always there for us. They're always available. It's just we need to connect. We need to be in the right space. We need to be open. And always having this spiritual curiosity, this willing to dig deeper and work with our stuff. So we'll recite once in Tibetan. There's a slower chant. We'll do that, and twice in English. Sangye chodan sogi chognam la chanchu bardu dagni kyab suji dagi chinso gebe sonam gidrola penjir sangye drubar shok. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Here is just briefly, the image of the mandala offering that we're going to make. A depiction of the universe, as you can see here too. So we're part of a massive, we know that, even from astronomy, we're part of a massive universal system. Particularly here we live on the southern continent, but there's other continents who have other types of beings who have different lifespans. So we just try and imagine everything amazing that we enjoy in this universe and in all the universes that we could possibly imagine. Delicious foods, lights, beautiful forests and parks, and as I said in the beginning, deep blue skies, sun and the moon, different lights illuminating the worlds. As much as we can, we offer what we call a mandala, or kind of something at least precious that we offer, so we can receive by offering. We create an environment to receive the essence of the teaching, to hold, to understand the essence of whatever we're hearing. Saji bogi joshe meto tramri rablingji ni de gyambadi sangye shindu mete uwarye drogun namdak shinga Chuparsho Giram Guru Ratna Mandala Gamne Yadayami. Then a few mantras. Muni meaning requesting, so we recite mantra. We want to awaken the sage-like qualities. Muni means sage. We want to awaken, always be awakening our wisdom energy, our innate wisdom. That's the place we come from in Tantra. We have this innate, fundamental, clean, clear, pure wisdom. That's what we want to touch and awaken. manifests completely in our whole being, this innate wisdom. So we're requesting that when we recite the mantra. It's like every mantra, every syllable we imagine is touching that innate wisdom within us and waking it up. We can try and feel that when light and nectar come from the Buddha. And the kind of power of the mantras and syllables waking up that innate wisdom. It's kind of what mantra does. Tayada om mune mune maha munaye soha. 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 All right, so welcome to class 2 of Introduction to Tantra. So last week was a kind of introduction to touching on what is Tantra. And some of the what else did we talk about last week? What is the meaning of the word Tantra? What that meant. I'm not going to go over any of that this week. We're just going to dive a little bit more into the background of Tantra, and then start talking about a little bit more like how we practice Tantra. What does the nut and bolts of that look like? So. One thing I wanted to mention, I think I mentioned it maybe, I think on Sunday class, but I don't think anyone was at that class, so it's okay. I'm mentioning it at a few of my classes I'm at, so I wanted to just bring to mind, so how are we, because this came up last night, just like how we approach Dharma practice, in general. I wanted to use a bit of an analogy or a story. So in the early days at Kopan, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they were very fortunate, the students. Did I tell this last night? I don't think I mentioned this last week about Rinpoche and Lama teaching the 10-day courses. Anyone? I don't think so, yeah. So Kate's saying no, so I'm taking that as a no, yeah. I was looking at Kate because I thought Kate will remember, So this is a good way to think about, because the Lamas often reflect like what's going on with us, It was very much like the quality of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe. Their minds are so pristine, so clear, They reflect back to us in a way what we need to be doing, what the work we need to be doing, and so in this in this way, when they taught the courses in the very early days at Kopan Monastery, or the one in Nepal, which Lama and Rinpoche founded in the late 60s, early 70s, because they weren't teaching in the West yet. Both of them taught the courses. The students were very fortunate. They had a lot of very challenging conditions because there wasn't much money. Everyone was very poor. A lot of sickness, health, very poor rooms, sleeping on straw mats, and incredible hardship they went through to hear the Dharma in those days. But they had the incredible fortune to have Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche teach the whole course. Can you imagine? It's unbelievable. Being in front of these two great lamas, these yogis. So how they taught was like Rinpoche would come in, because last week I talked a little bit about some of the difference between Sutra and Tantra, yeah? So Lama Zopa Rinpoche would mainly teach on Sutra, going through suffering, the causes of suffering, the kind of heavier stuff, what the whole problem is, what's going on in our mind right now, and what we need to avoid and abandon. And so, and talking a lot about the different realms that you can be reborn in. So sometimes it gets a bit heavy, when we hear the Sutra teachings, because it's very much, Sutra's telling us what the problem is, what we need to fix, what's wrong with us right now. So that's kind of what Rinpoche's responsibility was, often focused more on that side, Then Lama Yeshe would come in and talk all about how we're the deity, how we're enlightened, how we can be the deity and enlightened, and we're Chunrizig and we're Tara, and so come in with such exciting and exuberant teachings, So everybody would get really happy, and then Rinpoche would come in again and say, but you're suffering and karma and delusion, and go through all that again. So they would go back and forward in these two kind of roles, So very much what that is how we have to be a little bit in our practice, So sometimes we hear the sutra teachings, renunciation and suffering and karma and delusion. We need to get a scope of the problem. Yeah, we've not figuring it out ourselves. We know we have a little bit of anger or anxiety or fear. Now some of us understand some attachment. We can see it's in our mind, desire. We see some faults in those, That's why we're here. But renunciation, what that is getting what we try to understand, what is the whole scope of the problem? What do I need to completely free myself from? Right? So that's what we're doing in Sutra. We're diving into that, not to get ourselves depressed or down, but to really, being that, not the bad cop, but the cop who's really highlighting the problem. Yeah. So we need to do that, because if we don't know all the problem, we won't be capable enough to kind of move into Tantra, because we won't know what Tantra's trying to work with, also in a different way, in a different method, but it's still trying to work against these delusions. We're trying to oppose them in these practices. So, but the nice thing about Tantra is it awakens something, whereas from the side of Sutra, we're working almost from this angle. We're trying to bring in the teachings from this side, cultivate the causes, remove the problem. It's coming from more this angle, Whereas Tantra, we're coming from more deep innate energies that are already existing within us and trying to wake them up. Use them to overcome the delusions. Right? So certainly when we move into, really any level of Tantra, but when we get deeper into Tantra, what we're really, the motivation there is to utilise Tantric practice to remove the delusions, not to become this dazzling great deity who everybody loves. And of course, we are trying to become the deity, yes, but the deity is someone who's oneness with no delusions. They don't have any delusions. They're finished. They're done. So the beautiful innate nature that we have is manifesting like the deity. But we cannot just start at the level of the deity and hope that that'll just get rid of the delusions. We need to have the understanding, the rootedness in renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realising emptiness. And I'll explain that, keep explaining that as we go through. We need to blend, and as I mentioned last week, we need to blend them together. So we need to work with Sutra and Tantra together. And I think that's kind of the essence of what I was saying last week. And if you don't get anything out of this course, that's what you need to hold. The importance of practicing Sutra and Tantra together. This is the Geluk tradition, and actually this is tradition in all the four schools. They practice both together. We don't just jump into Tantra. Ladan, do you have a question?
Yes, I have just a question. I don't get it. Is it Sutra, common or causal path? And the discourse in Sanskrit, it's Tantra, or it's still talking about Sutra?
No, this page is just Sutra. So Sutra, and I'm going to go on to this now. That was just a little bit more of an introduction, just again, really kind of going over what I said, just emphasising the importance of Sutra and Tantra together, and what do we mean? I was just explaining that generally. And this is just, again, there is differences in Sutra and Tantra, but they need to be practiced, they're practiced together. There's differences in them because they do different purposes. So Sutra path, generally though, and that's why more people are attracted towards Sutra, is that Sutra means a discourse in Sanskrit. It refers specifically to those teachings that Buddha intended for a large audience. So many people, there's many countries, Buddhist countries, they only practice the Sutra path. They don't practice Tantra. Some of them don't even practice the Mahayana path. They're not holding this kind of aspiration to achieve enlightenment for all sentient beings. They are aiming for self-liberation because, of course, it is easier. The more we study and practice Buddhism, we can see it's very nice that we want to benefit others. That's nice. But the skills and qualifications you need to do that they take some time. They take some efforts. So it's nice to start with the aspiration, but then once we delve in deeper to develop bodhicitta, it's not an easy job. But the kind of benefits, the incredible, how much you can benefit others, as we see in the examples of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, someone who holds bodhicitta. It's unbelievable what you can do for sentient beings, you know. So, but generally, yes, sutra is the general, it's practiced to general audience, and so there's more people. It's easier, you know, it's easier to understand, you know, it's just chipping away at the blocks and the problems that we've got in the mind right now, you know, it's quite, and at that level it's easy to access, you know, so that's sutra, bigger audience. So here we go into the Tantra path, is called the uncommon or resultant path. Tantra teachings are also discourses of the Buddha, but these teachings are of a most advanced nature and are called esoteric teachings. Tantra uses a more direct yet more complex set of techniques to achieve the same goal in a single lifetime. So just so you know, some of us know already, but we may see Tantra expressed in different terms. Vajrayana. So we have three vehicles. What are the three vehicles that the Buddha taught? Maybe not Bay and Urs, because they know, but I want to see who else. When we're talking about Vajrayana, there's two other vehicles that the Buddha taught. Kate?
Is it Hinayana and Mahayana?
Yes, yeah. Good. I thought you would know, but it's just checking in, you know, your knowledge. So Hinayana is predominantly, it is the sutra path, you know, sutra teachings. And that is the focus is on achieving self-liberation. You know, what does that mean? Complete freedom from karma and delusions. The mind gets cleansed completely of karma and delusions. The two main causes of suffering that the Buddha taught. Why are we in this predicament of birth, old age, sickness, death, things never being quite right, never being quite, you know, always bumping into problems and challenges? Well, it's coming for the mind. It's hard to really digest that, but all our stuff, it's not coming for out there, it's coming for the mind. It's only coming for the mind. And that is the big discovery that we all need to make, you know. It's a really big discovery, yeah. So Hinayana, Mahayana is also the great vehicle, you know. So we are taking on this great motivation to achieve enlightenment. It's a greater motivation. Self-liberation is an initial motivation. It's a bit lower motivation. It's still wonderful. I mean, if we could get rid of karma and delusions this life, I mean, that would be unbelievable, amazing, you know. What a work. However, Mahayana, then we take kind of like bodhisattva vows, and we really train, and we realise we're going to train over some lifetimes in the six perfections, and we're going to achieve enlightenment and have the qualities and abilities to really come back like a Guru Buddha, you know, and benefit others, like we see in His Holiness Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe, you know, like that, developing this mind of bodhicitta, where we can really attract and have the power and ability to help subdue sentient beings, because we've been through our own stuff, you know. And we've also developed the skill to be able to do that. It's not just going through your own limitations, it's developing a whole other level of skill and ability and removing what we call subtle obscurations, a type of selfishness, self-concern of the mind. So the mind's is only awake for others. There's no sense of there's no sense of self getting in the way at all. That's in a simple way. And then the Vajrayana teachings, this is what we're looking at now, the tantric teachings, you know, just getting an introduction to what they are. So it's this is it's an uncommon path. Let's pull my notes up. It's still, you know, as I say, to practice Vajrayana, you know, we need to practice all three vehicles. So then if you say I'm practicing Tantra, that means that you're a Mahayana Tantra practitioner. You know, you're practicing Tantra with the Mahayana motivation to become enlightened for all sentient beings. You know, those paths need to be threefold. You know, so that's why it takes a lot longer to understand, to learn about the praxis and start to kind of be able to get some sense of what's going on, because we're trying to kind of hold and get a feeling of the three vehicles here, not just one. So it takes a little bit longer. People say Tibetan Buddhism's complicated. Yeah, it is in the beginning. But then when you start to blend these practices together, you start to see how skillful they are, and you can take the essence for each one and really start to develop quite a powerful practice that's working with the delusions. So just to show in the respect of how Tantra is more esoteric, it's taught to a smaller audience, a kind of different type of audience. Go on to the next slide. And I'm happy to make these slides available for you, because at the end of the class we do tend to give people the opportunity to do a small assessment. I think that's a better word. Just assessing what you took out of the class, So I'm happy to make those available if it's helpful, just to keep track where you are, remind us where you are and what you got in the class. So how tantric teachings were taught: secret tantric teachings during the Buddha's lifetime. According to the Vajrayana lineages, the Buddha taught Tantra during his lifetime, but not publicly. That's why they're called uncommon. It's the uncommon path, in an esoteric way. I mean, sometimes, and this is why often you find in other countries, where there's predominantly just practicing, not just, but practicing the Theravada teachings. Sometimes they don't accept the existence of tantric teachings because they're taught in this very esoteric sort of mystical way. The Buddha would appear often as a tantric deity and teach disciples in the aspect of that deity. So how could that be? Because none of us can see tantric. I don't know about you, but I don't see tantric deities just appearing out the sky, So they were taught to high-level bodhisattvas, beings who had already have high spiritual accomplishments, often revealed to deities in other realms and then brought down to this realm, into the human realm, by, again, yogis, great practitioners who had visions of these deities. Or sometimes, again, practitioners who had a karmic connection to understand them. So, for example, I have one story here I wanted to share of one example where the Buddha taught to one king. And this also shows a little bit the difference between Sutra and Tantra, how it can be practiced. So, there's a king called King Indrabhuti. So he was a ruler of Odiyana, which is a place kind of in the Swat Valley around kind of Pakistan, Afghan, in old days, where it is now. It was in the Swat Valley in the older days at the time of the Buddha. He was a very powerful king. He very highly intelligent, very devoted to the Buddha. And he lived amid, wealth, sensual pleasure, royal responsibility. But he himself had a deep wish to practice the Dharma, but he realised, he just felt with the responsibilities he held, he wasn't someone who was going to be able to just renounce the kingdom. As the monastics in those days did, as the Buddha did, he left the kingdom, and many of the monastics, his followers, all followed him and walked around India and had a very simple lifestyle. And the Buddha, King Indrabhuti, was very devoted to the Buddha, but he felt like, I can't, for me it's not going to work to do that, leave the kingdom. So he asked the Buddha, how can I attain full awakening without abandoning my life in the world? And this was his request, because of course, when, even we saw, for those of us who are familiar with the Buddha's life story, when he achieved enlightenment, he didn't just go out from his side to teach. He didn't say, okay, well, I'm just going to hop over there and teach, however Buddhas do. No, it was actually these beings, Indra and some gods, so they could see that the Buddha was awakened, and he had so much to share and tell, what he had discovered. So they came down and they offered a wheel to the Buddha and requested the Buddha to please teach, because there's many beings who will benefit and be able to receive and have gained realizations out of your teaching. So like that, always in this tradition, one doesn't kind of just announce that they're going to teach. One usually, that's what we wait to be requested. So like that, the Buddha was requested by King Indrabhuti, can you give me a practice? How can I achieve enlightenment while still being in my kingdom? So the Buddha, and that was at that point that the Buddha saw that out of the merit, so this king had incredible merit, sort of, even though he lived in the kingdom, he had a deep understanding in sense of renunciation. You know, his motivation came from wanting to achieve enlightenment, wanting to get out of samsara, understanding that he was under the control of karmic limitations. So he needed a path that he could practice in the context of his kingdom, but still having strong internal renunciation. He wanted a path that could lead to enlightenment in one lifetime. But of course, because the Buddha saw he was genuine, sincere, he had genuine bodhicitta, genuine motivation to benefit others, a genuine motivation to get out of samsara, and he had some sort of karmic readiness to practice Tantra. The Buddha gave what we call the Guya Samaja. It's a higher level of tantric teaching. And then also other cycles of tantric teachings he offered to King Indrabhuti at that time. But again, it wasn't taught publicly. It was more privately to a smaller audience. And it also required empowerments and vows and commitments, which again, in the last class, we're going to go over a little bit more what the sort of highest yoga tantra looks like, because there's different levels of tantra that we can move into, you know, and it gets more involved also as you get into the higher levels of tantra. So this is just showing that it's possible. What this is an example for us as lay practitioners, you know, it's definitely possible that we can practice and achieve enlightenment in our life as it is right now. You know, we don't have to have the outer aspect of becoming necessarily ordained, necessarily giving up this external life, you know. It's possible within Tantra because of the powerful, skillful methods to awaken and achieve, you know, some kind of realizations or deep insights into the practice in this life. Okay. Next slide. So a little bit more again. How is Tantra different from Sutra? Tantric approach to solving problems. The causal versus the resultant vehicle. Although Tantric practitioners do not neglect creating the same causes as the followers of Sutra, they take the future result of full spiritual evolution as the very starting point of their path. So that's from Introduction to Tantra by Lama Yeshe. Give me a second. So before I go into that a little bit more, I wanted to first ask, maybe some of us who have been here before, I'll stop the share so I can see you for a minute. Is the end goal, do we think the end goal for Sutra and Tantra, is it the same? If we just practice Sutra, you know, can we achieve the same results as practicing Sutra and Tantra together? Yes, Madhulika.
Hi, Venerable Angie. I hope you're well.
Hi.
From what I heard from you, I think Sutra is for seeking enlightenment of all sentient beings over many lifetimes, versus if you practice Sutra and Tantra together, in the Mahayana practice, it is for seeking bodhicitta and enlightenment across all sentient beings in one lifetime. So I suppose Tantra accelerates.
Very good.
It's
Yes,
a timeline element, I think.
Yes, very good, very good. Thank you. Yeah, you got it in a nutshell there. So this is the quality of Tantra. So yes, if you practice now, again, we're mentioning the three vehicles. The Hinayana vehicle, you know, it's not a great term, Theravada, and lesser or lower, but I think there's another term that's better, but it's not lesser as in not important, because we still need to have the grounding in Sutra, yeah? So that one we need to practice anyway, but it's the Hinayana, Mahayana vehicle are both Sutra-based practices, yeah? So as Madhulika was saying, to practice those, now the Buddha manifested, many, many lifetimes. You can read the Jataka tales. These are often taught, read during the time. We're actually coming up to Tibetan New Year first in the 16 Days of Miracles. That's happening in over February, mid-February through early March. And during that time, it's often a very auspicious time to read some of these previous lives, Jataka tales of the Buddha, where he practiced bodhicitta, he practiced generosity, morality, and he gave many times his body, his wealth, his possessions, many things to achieve enlightenment for sentient beings. He practiced what we call the sutra path very intensely for many lifetimes. So you can read something like his previous 30 lives, and that's what the Buddha taught himself when he achieved enlightenment. He taught these stories, showing the disciples just giving examples of how much he practiced in that path to achieve awakening in the lifetime he did achieve enlightenment, how many lifetimes, what kind of lifetime timeline are we looking at. So generally it says in the sutra teachings, to achieve enlightenment takes 3 countless great eons if you practice sutra. That's kind of a little bit hard to get your head around, I think I have something here. It's 3 times, for those who might be able to wrap their head around it, are a bit more mathematical, it's said to take 3 times 10 to the 57th power. I can't wrap my head around that, but I found that somewhere. To achieve enlightenment, from the start is sort of developing the awakening mind all the way through to developing the 6 perfections, that's going to take you that amount of lifetimes, to achieve enlightenment. So with the tantric path, if you practice sutra and tantra combined, and you're able to take more in the realm of the highest yoga tantra commitments, which again I'll go into the last class, taking tantric vows, bodhisattva vows, keeping your commitments that you receive in these initiations, nicely as well as you can. You can achieve enlightenment up to 16 lifetimes. Wow, isn't that a great advert? So again, you need to put the effort in the work, but that's just 16 lifetimes. And of course, there are stories where it says, if you do certain deity retreats and everything, you can achieve enlightenment in 3 years and 3 months. There are these deity retreats where you can work with one particular deity, reciting the mantra, the visualizations, developing levels of concentration, and going through the different stages of that tantra, where it's possible you can even achieve enlightenment in one lifetime, But His Holiness said not to kind of grasp to that too strongly. But 16 lifetimes is that one's a goal. That's a good goal. That's a good plan. So this is one of the benefits of Tantra, is that you can, as in Madhulika was saying, that you're practicing these 3 vehicles combined. You can bring enlightenment. You can achieve enlightenment much more quickly. So the end goal is the same. There's just a difference in time. So if the end goal is the same, is the emptiness in Tantra same as Sutra? So emptiness in Tantra, do you think it's the same as Sutra? For those of you who know a little bit about emptiness. Anyone want to... Oh, somebody's got their hand up, sorry. Rick. Got a few
They're
hands.
both equally empty.
Yes. So the emptiness that is realised in Tantra is the same as Sutra, though the mind realising it is subtler.
Yes.
But there's not a difference in regard to the wisdom. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we go into how you practice Tantra. Joel, you've got a question?
I do have a question. If it took the Buddha many lifetimes to achieve enlightenment, how did he know about Tantra?
Well, again, it's a little bit more on the esoteric side. Once you become... There are actually teachings where it's a certain point, that the Buddha does receive tantric initiations. So he did there's a point in the path, and before I go into it in more detail, I'd need to read up on it a little bit more because I don't know all off the top of my head. But there is a point in the path where you do need, even though you practice sutra for a long, long time, you do receive at some point tantric initiation to sort of really complete the final subtleties of the path. And there's also stories that of the Buddha himself. You see, once you achieve enlightenment, then also you're aware. You can see you're in communication with these tantric deities. Your mind's become so purified, so you can also communicate with them. But I think the point that we're making here is mainly, because it's a good point that you're bringing up, Joe, on a practical level. But on another level, once you get to a certain level of spiritual involvement, you will be able to see and communicate with deities who will speed up your path. But if you do, so the key point here is that if we can do that sooner rather than later, then we won't have to take like 2.99 eons, countless great eons, to get enlightened. Yeah? Does that help a little with your question?
Yes, it does. I think so. Thank you.
It's just really emphasising here we're emphasising the power of using these three vehicles together, And as I said also, in the first class, not everybody will have the karma to practice Tantra. We're just not attracted to it. We can see in this, how many people, mostly the sutra teachings, it's to a common audience because that fits for most people's mind, Deities and mantras and visual, it's all a little bit out there, for too many people. They don't have the karmic connection with that. They're not pulled or drawn to that. That can take many, many, many lifetimes, a lot of purification, a lot of lifetimes on the sutra path before you have the merit, the opening of the mind, the disposition to hear and kind of be attracted to Tantra. So there are, in one way we're saying three countless great eons, but what we're really saying here is that it takes a long time because many people we don't have the disposition to hear, to relate to Tantra. And even as I said last week, many Buddhas we have 1,000 Buddhas who are going to appear over countless thousands of eons. Maitreya Buddha is the next one. He will not teach Tantra, not because he's not qualified, because once you become a Buddha, you're qualified to teach everything, right? So that's the other thing. The Buddha may not have, this current Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, may not have practiced Tantra for, a huge amount of lifetimes. But once you become a Buddha, you're qualified in all the three paths. So you can teach whatever the disposition of the beings are that you're going to teach. Does that help a little bit as well, Joe?
Yes. So like with any teacher, you start with where the child's at. So
exactly, and so for many Buddhas who come, in this 1,000, I'm not going to go into that, but I mentioned that last week about we were having, in Buddhist cosmology, there's going to be 1,000 Buddhas appear in this kalpa, this huge thousands and thousands, beyond, we can't imagine, thousands and thousands of years, billions, zillions of years, going to be 1,000 Buddhas appear. Only something like 3 or 4 of them will teach Tantra because the students, as you say, us as the children, we don't have the capacity to hear. We don't have the interest, we don't have the intelligence, the merit. It's not going to work for us, So it's more coming from, and also Buddhas often manifest their path according to the teacher, the disciples they're going to train, they're going to subdue. So that's another part as well, So it's not all completely straightforward, but they often, how they practice, that's the students they're going to be able to benefit and manifest, teach, obviously. But all the Buddhas are completely qualified once you're enlightened. Once you're at a certain level of being a bodhisattva, you become qualified. You have quality and ability to teach Tantra for sure. It's down to it's mostly down to the merit of the students. All right. So this quote, we're going to go into that a little bit more. Yeah, this I'm going to cover a little bit more this evening. The causal versus resultant vehicle. How we take the future result as a very starting point of the path. This is where we're going to go into deity yoga, what that means. But just to finish this off, and again, this is another couple of ways where Sutra and Tantra are different. Other differences is in method. So the wisdom side is the same, right? I mentioned that, that's what Rich said. The wisdom that realizing emptiness, the wisdom that we're going to accomplish, achieve, realize is the same. But it's the way we get there that's different, right? The method, the approach, how we get there is different. And what it does, it's what we're doing here is, again, it's coming from more inside. It's awakening and accessing our subtle and very subtle levels of consciousness. Whereas on the sutra approach, we're chipping away, almost from the outside, you know, creating the causes and conditions, chipping away, removing the karma and delusion, which we still do in the tantric approach, but we're also at the same time coming from another angle and awakening and accessing subtle and very subtle consciousnesses as the basis for waking up the wisdom, the innate wisdom that's kind of already there. It's just not manifest in us. We're not familiar with it. We're familiar with grosser mental states. We're familiar with identifying with our karma and delusions. This is me, this is how I am. We're familiar with putting ourselves in a box. We have moments of mini enlightenment, maybe, mini ahas, but it's nothing near what we could have, you know, who we really are, you know. And the other difference, why Tantra's taught to more select audiences, because it relies on gurus giving empowerments, initiations, instructions, commentaries, and that requires us from our side to develop a certain faith, a certain respect in the guru, you know. And these, you know, so that, again, we go into that more in the last class, you know, what that requires. You know, so it does require a certain mental state, a certain sort of deeper conviction and faith in the particular practices of Tantra. So here, some questions, okay, just before we go into this part on deity yoga. B.
Hi. So I remember Geshe Lakso mentioned that only in the highest yoga tantra is the instruction of how to use subtle energy to create a form body of the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean for a sutra practitioner without practicing the highest yoga tantra? Would that person be able to become enlightened in the sense of, I guess achieving the three
would they be
bodies
able to
of the
receive,
Buddha?
would they be able to achieve the 4 bodies of the Buddha
Mm-hmm.
without tantric practice?
Right.
As far as I'm aware, not. You know, that's why I'm saying at the very end, even then, you know, for high level bodhisattvas, as my understanding is, and I need to check this, but as my understanding is, you know, what the really main emphasis we're making here, to get to high levels of bodhicitta on the sutra path, it's going to takes a long time, yeah? You can get to that quicker through Tantra. But my understanding is that the very kind of, you know, when you get to the higher levels, there's like 10 bodhisattva bhumis, you know. So when you get to a certain level, even in that, I think you have to take tantric empowerment, you know, if you're going to achieve those bodies, to awaken these bodies of the Buddha. That's my understanding. But I would need to double check that, B. But I think that's really what Geshe-la said as well, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and this is why when we move into like certainly high yoga tantra practice, which we're not going to, we'll touch on this class, but you can only talk about so much without an initiation. But that's the skill, because actually these bodies, these subtle bodies, which I will talk, the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya and everything, they come out of the, you know, most subtle, they come out of our enlightenment, you know. They come out of what we call Dharmakaya, truth body, the Buddha, and we manifest them to benefit sentient beings. That comes out of our bodhicitta as well. You know, so I think But I think you cannot achieve them without without moving in at the later stages in a receiving tantric initiation. So the Buddha, I think at the time of the Buddha, he was on such a high level. When he was close to enlightenment, my understanding is he was receiving initiations for for deities, at that time. But I would need to check that to be totally sure. Does that help a little bit, Bae?
Yes, thank you very much.
Ladan?
Yes, Venerable Angie, I have a question about, because we were talking, I write it down. When we were comparing the Tantra and Sutra like method, we need in the both we need somehow realizing emptiness or touching a little bit. I wanted
Yes.
to know if, because I hear about it, I hear a lot of time that when they said you realize directly emptiness, or by like cause and effect kind of thinking, you
Inference? You mean inference?
inference, yes.
Mhm.
I wanted to know if in Tantra we realize it directly, or it's not that.
Again, it's yeah. I mean, of course, eventually you realize emptiness directly through tantric practice, but we can still use analysis through our practice of tantra. When we're
Yes,
in the beginning, we still need to use analysis to get to the
analysis.
subtle, to sort of chip away at the wrong view self. We need to
Okay.
do that. But there is, again, when we go into the realm of high yoga, even, definitely a high yoga tantra, it's possible to use certain methods. What we do is you awaken bliss. You use methods to awaken bliss that helps you to realize emptiness. That's the
Okay.
method, awakening bliss. But again, we're not going to go into that in great detail right now, because again, it's really when you get initiations, you go more. But that's what we're talking about a little bit here. The method is kind of using subtle energies, using
Yeah.
these subtle energies, the gross and subtle minds, which are have a nature, and they are they are the nature of wisdom. Our most subtle, clear light mind its
Yeah.
nature is wisdom. So what we're trying to do is wake that up. Mind gets more subtle. It's easier to see how we're conceiving a wrong view of self in that state. When we're in a gross state of mind, we're completely locked in with who we
Yeah.
think we are. So when we see that even when we meditate now, even when you do some Kriya Tantra practice, you dissolve the deity, you move into the deity, you try and be one with the deity, you go into a more subtle mind, and even in that space, you try to see how the I is appearing. So you use some analysis there, because it's only at the level of more skilled, kind of high yoga tantra practices that you're really able to awaken a sort of high level of bliss that's able to cut through the wrong view of self. But yes, you're using subtle minds, but that's where we're using Sutra and Tantra together, using the energies of Tantra, the bliss, the peace, the natural wisdom nature of the mind, waking that up. And, for some time we still need to use some analysis.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit both in the beginning. And then you get into much more kind of complex, deeper tantric practices when you go into the more subtle body, and you're really just focusing on the experiences, sort of bliss and emptiness, and trying to unify your mind with that, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Madhulika, I don't know if I need to talk much more. I'm going to talk about this, but you're asking the question, so it's good. Madhulika.
Venerable Angie, I had actually a question. So if you've not taken refuge, then
Uh-huh.
are you able to do any practices, tantric practices, that's my first question. And then my second question is things like, for example, the Vajrasattva practice, where you're visualizing Vajrasattva. Is that a tantric practice? And then lastly,
Let's
there
just do those first two. I might not remember the last one by the time I get to the first. I'll do the first one.
yes.
So, and these are two are easy. Yeah. So yeah, without refuge, refuge it definitely makes the praxis stronger. The more vows, commitments, the more we're invested in Buddhism, heartfelt.
Yes.
Engaged in the teachings, for sure it makes it more powerful. But yes, the nice thing is we can do what we call, and I'm going to go into the different types of tantric classes, But the first tantric class is Kriya Tantra, the lower Tantra or Action Tantra. So at that level, the lamas of this generation, for sure anyway, this time and age, give us permission to practice that without refuge. I mean, just in a basic way, you can't visualize yourself as a deity, but you can practice the mantra. You can visualize Vajrasattva as a Kriya Tantra aspect. So there's different aspects of Vajrasattva. There's a single one, just the male deity. And then there's the high Yoga Tantra aspect, and mother and father it's called together, embracing. So you would only be allowed, without initiation, to visualize the single one. Use that, recite the mantra. Because, for us as Westerners, it's good not to just jump in, So it gives us a chance to experience and feel if this is benefiting my mind, That along with the sutra practices, because these two are very key in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, So yes, you are allowed to practice in a basic way these practices, but not visualizing yourself as a deity, but to kind of get a taste of them before you decide to maybe take refuge or take the initiation in that practice at the Kriya Tantra level. At the level of maybe Compassion Buddha, Chenrezig, Medicine Buddha, Vajrasattva, Tara, you can certainly do those, yeah.
Okay. My last question was, are we allowed to, or do we have access to certain Vajrayana practices? I had discovered a book on Sha meditation.
CHOD?
Yes.
So that one is High Yoga Tantra. So that one you can't do without initiation.
But the lower level, which is a very simpler form, which is being taught by, I think, Lama Sultran. I sent that to Geshe-la, and he said, yes, it is okay to practice that because it is a very simpler form. You're not.
Okay. Well, that's fine. If the Geshe who's teaching it is giving you permission.
Okay.
And I know that's one of their main practices there, so that's probably for that reason they've made a simplified form so you can see if it's, something is going to benefit you, before you start taking initiations.
Yeah, it was a beautiful practice. What I was curious about was, are there other practices like that are available?
We have Tara practices. I mean, we have many in this in the FPMT. Many. We'll probably do something. We'll do one deity practice during the practice day for these classes. So we'll introduce you then. But we have many, many opportunities in our organisation. There's a weekly Vajrasattva practice that's offered through Land of Medicine Buddha. You can find that, so you can join that. But yeah, you can always ask me later, but there's definitely opportunities to kind of taste these practices before you take before you take initiation.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so tantric approach to solving problems, the technique or the method, as I say, there's a method, different method in Tantra, involves what's called deity yoga, cultivating the view of ourselves as a meditational deity and a fully enlightened being, a Buddha. So this is what we call taking the result into the path here. It's a kind of fake it till you make it approach. Identifying yourself with the qualities of that deity, of that being right now. So I say, without an initiation, you can't actually, visualize yourself as that deity, Tara, or Chenrezig, or Medicine Buddha, but we can start by doing something, a simple meditation where we just identify with being sort of oneness with the deity. But here, particularly in the practice of Tantra, once you maybe decide and take initiation, it's called the resultant vehicle because it's enabling us to take the future result of enlightenment into the present moment as the very basis of our practice. It's like, I'm enlightened. Oh, look, what does it feel like to be enlightened right now? Identifying with the qualities, the deity, the psychology, the deity. It's a kind of sense of emanating ourselves in the aspect of the deity to become familiar with those pure qualities. So right now, what's meditation? Meditation, the Tibetan word it means becoming familiar with something. So what are we doing in Tantra? We're trying to become familiar, like unify our body, speech and mind, our whole psychology, our whole way of being with the qualities of that particular deity, who is a fully enlightened being, whether it's Tara, Medicine Buddha, the Buddha Compassion. Each one of these beings, each one of these deities are fully awake. They just embody a certain aspect more strongly of enlightened mind. Chenrezig embodies in a stronger way the kind of quality compassion. Manjushri is called the embodiment of the Buddha's wisdom. Chenrezig is the embodiment or the manifestation of the compassion of all the Buddhas. Tara is the manifestation of the activity of all the Buddhas, but she's fully awake, but she has that particular aspect and quality, So it's a method visualizing, identifying ourselves with the deity. It kind of has a power to bring out our fundamentally pure nature. Awaken, as I say, within our wisdom nature. Bringing these subtle hidden aspects of ourselves out, through the power of mantra, visualization, identification. So many different parts of the sadhana we do to try and really bring out the feeling, the sense, the quality of the deity within ourselves. Deity yoga, just to give us a bit of a deeper sense of what that means. Deity, a tantric deity, yidam. Yidam is the Tibetan word. A symbolic expression of enlightenment. It's not really, symbolic, I probably shouldn't have put that word, but it's an expression of enlightenment. It's not symbolizing, it is an expression of enlightenment in that aspect, in that form. A manifestation of compassion, wisdom and power, all unified in that one being. All the qualities are unified in that aspect that we are visualizing ourselves as. A mirror, and it acts as a mirror that's reflecting our Buddha nature, where we want to go. We're mirroring, we tend to mirror back to ourselves, I'm like this, I'm like that, I'm like that. We mirror back our limitations a lot. We're all very good at that in the West, So we want to mirror back, no, this is who you really are. It just needs to be brought out, We need to bring it out. Yidam is an interesting word. And that actually, again, it means deity as well, but just slightly different orientation when we translate it into Tibetan. A sacred commitment of the mind. And this comes a little bit more, get a feeling more for that once you take these initiations and you take commitments to do the practice, and maybe, at some point you might be fortunate enough to meet a lama who said, this is the deity that you have the most kind of connection with, karmic connection, So we were very fortunate when Rinpoche was with us. If you had the karmic fortune, Rinpoche would, if you requested and you were ready, Rinpoche would give us, the deity or deities. Sometimes you had 2 or 3 deities that you had the sort of karmic connection with. That aspect of that deity that was going to bring out your Buddha nature, that you're closer to. And that becomes, when that becomes your yidam or deity, it's like your sacred commitment, your bond to get close, to become one with that deity. That's your yidam. When you get that yidam practice, that's what it becomes. It's your commitment for life to kind of always be that deity, be one with that deity, and kind of identify as much with that deity, bring it into the present moment in your experience day to day as much as you can. And on the cushion and in day to day as much as you can. Yoga, meaning union of method and wisdom, union of appearance and emptiness. So yoga can mean to yoke, or to kind of unify the mind, this union, this completion. When you're enlightened, you've unified method and wisdom together. They're completely accomplished in your mind, and they're unified together. This is another part of tantric practice, unifying appearance and emptiness, which we'll go into a little bit more again, how you practice that. But yoking your mind, the present mind, to the result, but doing it as if you're already enlightened. So just to give us an idea of what we mean by deity yoga, that's kind of all the little bit of the different aspects of what deity yoga means, is unification. I mean, of course, in the beginning, we can't just say, well, I'm Tara, I've got two beautiful little, I put tala flowers, and I've got this stunning green body, and it's not like that, Of course, we have to have the foundation and renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. We very much have to have some understanding of emptiness before we practice Tantra, because the deity doesn't have any solid, concrete aspect. The Buddhas, they're not solid and concrete. They're light bodies. They're made. We are made of flesh, blood, bones, and then all the other stuff that comes inside. No, they're just made of pure wisdom. They manifest. A deity manifests from pure awakened wisdom. Nothing else. The deities manifest out of their compassion and their bodhicitta for us. So every pore, every particle of their being is just wisdom. It's this unification, appearance and emptiness, wisdom and compassion. That's what they're made of. So, for sure, we can't feel that in the beginning. But there's a special skill and technology somehow in this, when you visualize yourself, or even you visualize out there in the beginning, because we don't have the empowerment. Visualize Tara as a reflection of our inner Tara, our inner Buddha, our inner Chenrezig. It's a reflection of who we're going to become, and we bring that into us. Even at the end of the practice, we always dissolve the deity, bring in through the crown, and unify that where it goes deep with that as possible into the subtle mind, unifying that with our subtle consciousness. So that's so we can't visualize, we're creating imprints on our mind, impressions on our mind, moving the mind towards feeling a oneness, a connection, an intimacy, a closeness with that being, that deity. That's what we're trying to do with deity yoga. Let me see, just check my notes for a minute. Slide 19. In some ways, I think this is from Lama Yeshe's book, tantric practice, it's like a rehearsal for enlightenment. I mean, just like, in the beginning, it's a bit like role playing, because we don't feel it, But again, it's the fake it till you make it approach, That's a simple way of putting it. But it's a bit like role playing in the beginning, You're given this part, and this is the deity, and they've got so many arms and so many faces, and so like that, But then we have to kind of go into the role more, Well, what does the different parts of the body mean? What do the different aspects mean? What the qualities of that deity? So the more we find out about that role that we want to play, then slowly we say, when we visualize ourselves, we try to think, well, this is me. I am that deity, And it's like someone who becomes a really good actor, they slowly start to really more unify with the qualities, the experience, the psychology, the aspects of that deity, like a bit like that. But we do want to completely unify our whole being eventually with that role. But, you know, we have some great actors in the world to do that, but it's not quite like that. But it's a little bit like that in the beginning, you know, trying to take on that role within ourselves, that aspect, that quality. So you could say maybe our favourite deity, in some ways, you know, right now, you know, for me, certainly my role model, maybe the deities are like some like our role models, you know. I mean, for me, Lama Zopa Rinpoche was my role model, you know. So, but for me, he embodied all the deities, all the Buddhas, all the, you know, so he could give initiations on all these praxis, you know. So at some point, the thing is, once you become one of the deities, once you become Tara, once you are Tara, once you are Vajrasattva, once you are Chenrezig, you become all the Buddhas, you know. So, but somehow we can't, it's not easy for us to meditate them all at the same time, so it's often better for us to focus on one. But by focusing on the main one, the one that's ideally being given by you from a qualified teacher, or one or two sometimes, because we need maybe two aspects, eventually you become all of those, you know, through just being one. Because they all embody the same qualities. Again, it's just slight different emphases, different techniques, slightly different methods in the different practices, according to our capacity or disposition. Anything else? So for us, I'm going to go on to the next slide, slide 20. Why, I mean, for us really as Westerners, and why Lama Zopa Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe, you know, they really, really put so much effort into us to kind of connect, even at a basic level in the beginning, we know with tantric practice. Because as Lama says here, it's a simple truth that if we identify ourselves being fundamentally pure, strong and capable, we will eventually, you know, develop those qualities. But if we continue to think ourselves as dull, foolish and dim-witted, you know, it's hard, you know. We keep putting ourselves in a box. We keep imposing these self-imposed limitations on ourselves, you know, and that's very much before we meet Dharma, before we meet Buddhism, before we meet Purify, before we maybe understand we have this beautiful fundamental wisdom nature. That's where we often start, you know. So again, for Westerners, it's very good if we can do Sutra and Tantra together quite early on. Doesn't mean that you need to jump out and take tantric initiations. Just trying these basic tantric practices, Tara, Medicine Buddha, the deity out there, bringing the essence of the deity in. Because they are, and that's been my experience, you know, that it does help us to move through our limited view of ourself. It does something quite fundamental, and it helps us to start to feel that we have this nature that's much bigger than who we think we are, than our present kind of limited self-image, which can be quite low and oppressive and often hopeless, you know. So we don't need, in the beginning, necessarily, you know, really complex tantric practice, you know, high yoga tantric practice. We can start with the simple, basic tantric practices, as even, sorry, it was Andulika? Andulika, is it? I need to go and find your name.
Adulika.
Yeah, as you were saying, you know, the Geshe from the other centre was, the tube practice, you know, it's actually a very simple practice, but it's because it's simple, you can miss the point, you know, so you actually need to have kind of quite a good foundation to do that practice in renunciation, bodhicitta and emptiness at the level of more high yoga tantra. But, you know, out the kindness of Sultrami Altrione, who's a practitioner, you know, a skilled practitioner in that, yeah. She's developed a simple practice that people can just start with, you know, to get a sense of the practice before you get more involved and before you're not really quite qualified for the higher level of practice, just getting a taste. So this is what Lama Yeshe wanted for Westerners, to dip into these practices quite early on, to mix Sutra and Tantra quite early on. And that's why at our centres we offer these practices as a way for you to feel like it's possible. It's not something beyond you. And to feel how they supplement Sutra practice. They open up the mind. They give us courage. they connect us to this Buddha potential that we didn't know about until we met Buddhism, right? I mean, I guess we kind of knew we had some potentials, but we never thought we could become like Buddha, fully enlightened, fully awake. And we didn't really know all the ramifications of what Buddha nature, what it really is, what can unfold within us. We didn't have the methods younger, how to really awaken this wisdom energy. So it can help us to really overcome a sort of limited view of self quite early on. And of course, once you receive initiation, it brings out, it empowers the mind, through the power of that initiation, abhisheka, that empowerment. There's different, it can be called an initiation or empowerment. Abhisheka is a Sanskrit term. It brings out that power of your mind, that possibility. It awakens it more, that possibility that you can see that the mind can waken upon its limited view right now, away from that, beyond that. As Lama says, a quote from Lama, challenges this unreasonably low opinion of human potential by showing us how to view ourselves and all others as transcendently beautiful, as gods and goddesses, in fact. So, very beautiful. Sounds great, yeah? So another way that we call deity yoga, another expression is emptiness yoga. Because there's a strong, this is emphasizing how we need, definitely in the beginning, just some insight into emptiness, It's not nothingness. But the more we kind of develop our insight into emptiness, and actually, you see in the start, actually the Vajrasattva, the Tara, that can help us to see, even if it's not emptiness, but see there's a way that we exist, that we experience, we feel, we can perceive that's beyond what's going on right now. Right? So even in the beginning, we don't know much about emptiness, but if you're guided through the meditation, best to be guided in the beginning, you can start to wake up something inside yourself that knows that there's a way that we exist beyond how we do. Just that cuts through the wrong sense of self. I can exist way beyond how I perceive myself right now. Rinpoche would say that's like an atomic bomb, when we just start to question how we perceive me, myself and I right now. Just questioning that, Rinpoche would always say that's like an atomic bomb in the delusions. Even if we don't know how much further to go through that, but just having that curiosity, that questioning. Tantra, it helps to waken all that curiosity, that wish to have a deeper insight into how we exist. Madhulika?
It's less about a question, but more about a little bit about what I did over the winter break. I had wanted to sort of really focus on one obscuration attachment. And so when I asked Geshe-la, and then I also noticed this book, so he encouraged me to focus on meditating on bodhicitta and emptiness, in addition to cha, and then he also encouraged me to do the Vajrasattva practice. So I kind of did that continuously for pretty much 2 to 3 weeks, every day, all, both practices, cha and Vajrasattva, or Vajrasattva and emptiness. And it was an incredible, at least I felt it was an incredible transformation of my mind. And I benefited a lot, and it really accelerated the understanding of what attachment was, and it really accelerated how I can, recognize my own ego, and how I can sort of feed my ego and sort of reduce it to as minimal as possible. It's hard to do that every day now with work and so on, but those 2-3 weeks were just wonderful. And so I'm very interested in trying to figure out if there are additional other practices that I can also combine, particularly with visualization techniques that have been very, very powerful.
Well, thank you for sharing, Madhulika. But yeah, you touched on a key point there. So why Sutra and Tantra combined really support each other is because when we do the purification, like Vajrasattva, when we do the mantra visualization practices, what it does, because it wakes up our wisdom nature that's more powerful than the delusions, the subtle, more innate consciousnesses, more powerful, wakes them up, brings them to the forefront almost more in our mind. Then, as Madhulika said, then you're able to see how they attach. What is attachment? How is it functioning in my mind? That's what we want to do in our meditation. It's the whole point. We need to know what the delusions are, and then in our meditation, through doing these practices, bringing out our more innate fundamental nature, which is in the nature of emptiness, peace, bliss, stillness. When that wakes up, we're able to see how attachment disturbs the mind. We have that time. We can see how anger disturbs the mind. We have space from it. And because we have space, then we start to be able to work with it. We just keep doing these practices and they chip away from another angle, because we're bringing out the empty nature, we're bringing out the wisdom nature, we're bringing out the quality of peace, the innate quality of peace, stillness, the innate quality of compassion, love, and that's coming out. So then it's not like it completely destroys in the beginning the delusions, but it chips away at them and it gives us a handle on them like we didn't have before. Yeah, because we can see them arising in the mind, and the mind's not getting caught up in them so much, either at the level of thoughts, the level of emotion. And slowly we see them more and more we waken up that wisdom nature. The more and more we identify with the deity, which has this ability, emptiness yoga, to bring out the natural, the nature, the wisdom nature of the mind. More and more, it just kind of, it's like the delusions will start to fall away. We won't give them power. We're not clinging on to them, and they naturally subside because they're advantageous, right? They're not our nature. They're impermanent. They're stuck onto the mind, but they're not completely glued on there. They're not oneness with the nature of consciousness. So that's an important point. I think that's what your experience was. You're able to work with your attachment a little bit more. Gives you more courage, more confidence in the natural, your innate nature. The natural quality, the peacefulness. And then in that place, we say, this is me. Right. This peacefulness, this stillness, even if we get a slight insight into like the empty, clearer, pristine nature, we think, well, this is me. I'm not that other stuff. That's what we bring out, that experience. Now, fundamentally, it's not a self-existent I, right? It's also not self-existent. So in the beginning, even though we do emptiness yoga, what we're really tripping away at the beginning is the grosser delusions. The emptiness yoga allows us maybe not to get to emptiness right away, but to at least see how attachment is functioning in the mind, and it's not it's not really who we are. It's just something we've grasped and cling on to through wrong concepts, wrong delusions. So we can cut away at that. That's possible. The more this wisdom nature comes out, our anger is not me. It's separate. We get more and more separation for that because we're identifying with the purity, the pure qualities of the deity. This is me, And then slowly, as the grosser delusions go, we can get more and more into the subtleties of like, how do I actually exist then, How is the I appearing to the mind? Because without chipping away at anger and attachment, it's very difficult to see how is the concept of I think this is the next... Is this the next? Yeah. How is the concept of I mistaken? Overthrowing the tinnery ordinary appearance. The ordinary appearance of how we perceive ourselves as a me, myself, and I. It's hard to find that if we haven't chipped away at the grosser stuff. And then we do need some background teachings for sure on emptiness, how we approach that meditation. And not just that, cutting through the veil of ordinary appearance, and also, so we appear like a solid kind of small sense of I that needs to be protected. How's that appearing? And then how do we cling at that? We also cling at that as well, you know. So visualizing ourselves as a deity, pure in the nature of light and bliss, it's chipping away at that solid sense of self. And the sense of how we cling to the body very strongly as an I, my body, you know. Yeah, there's an innate sense of my body right now, yeah. My body, we have to acknowledge that first. We do feel my body. I mean, if somebody hits us, we feel it, we feel the pain, you know, because we're clinging to the sense of a body. Doesn't mean that we don't have a connection with the body, and it doesn't mean we ignore the body, but how we're identifying ourselves as being the body, oneness with the body, and possession of the body, that's mistaken. You know, it's so that needs to be cut through as well. That's what we're doing in deity yoga, cutting through these wrong concepts and appearances that are quite deep, you know. So bringing up the view of the deity or being oneness with, we're just that somehow that type of practice is cutting away at that delusion. So that's mainly, you know, just in a little bit of nutshell there, what we're doing with deity yoga practice. The two main things, these two are really important. As Lama says, overthrowing the tyranny. Ours are a funny thing in Scotland. Tyranny of ordinary appearance. So the key thing in Tantra is cutting through ordinary appearance and ordinary grasping. The ordinary appearance of how we think we exist, how that appears to the mind, and how we hold on to that really strongly. So that's the psychology of Tantra, reshifting that so that we start to identify with the light, blissful, joyful, empty nature of the deity. Not just the physical aspect, but the fundamental inner qualities of the deity as well, which are fundamentally empty, inherent existence. So those two together is kind of the method in Tantra.
And Angie, Neil has a question in the chat.
Okay, we'll have one more question, and then I realise that we're on time. So we're at the end of time. But yes, let's have one more question.
And Neil, would you like to...
Oh, what's the chat? Oh, sorry, I'll just look in the chat, sorry. So green tar... Oh, no, it's not that. How is the deity chosen? Is the ceremony passing a transference between guru and student? How's the deity chosen? I think what I would say is to get some, from a teacher that you trust, you have a connection with, or some Dharma students who know you well, you know. If you want to take an initiation, it's good to check in with, other Sangha, senior Sangha, or teachers, who can sort of guide you if it's a good time for you to take an initiation, you know. I mean, Kriya Tantra initiations, which I'm going to go into next week, are not so, they have lesser commitments. They still have commitments, but certainly at the level of High Yoga Tantra, you need to think more and get more specific advice for that. But I think that if you don't mind, I'm going to go into the initiation in another class. So are you okay if I leave the question for that? Because we'll go into a little bit more detail on empowerments and initiations and vows and commitments. That'll be in the last class. So I can talk about that a little bit more then, if that's okay. Yeah? All right, so I'm going to just share a couple of dedication prayers and then we will finish for this evening. But again, if you want to carry on with some of the reading that you have, please do during the week, and I'm always available if you have any questions you want to ask me through email. You can get my email for Bay if you don't have it already. So taking a moment. So the whole purpose of practicing Tantra is to benefit sentient beings. That's really, where do we pivot from? We pivot from, because Kelly asked that, just keep mentioning, a determination, a wish to free yourself of our limitation, karma and delusion. And then to really kind of try to embrace this mind-body bodhicitta this mind that we can, the supreme mind that brings so much happiness and peace to sentient beings, so much skill to guide sentient beings out of karma delusion. So may that ripen in me and in all sentient beings. And then we can also dedicate to realise emptiness as well. We'll just do those two. Chanju senjo rimbo she mage panam gegir she geba nyamba meba yi gonne gonde pelwar shog. May the precious view of emptiness not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline but increase more and more. And just for His Holiness' long life, incomparable kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Okay. Did you see those prayers? Did I share them?
Yes.
Oh, you
Yes.
could see them, yes. Good. All right. I wasn't just talking to myself. Good. You were all doing it, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Yeah. I do encourage you to do a wee bit of reading if you can. Yeah. Thank you, Kelly. Bless you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night. Nice to
Yeah,
see you.
good
A couple of new
night.
people as well, so it's nice to see you. Yeah. Take care.
Thank
Enjoy your
you.
week.
Thank you, Venerable
Thank you.
Angie.
Bye, Joe.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care. Good night.